This week on BSD Now, we interview Nick Wolff about how FreeBSD is used across the state of Ohio and some of the specific technology being used. That plus the latest news is coming your way right now on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 128, The State of BSD, recorded February 10th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Yeah, we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got a neat interview we did a little bit earlier with Nick Wolff over in State of Ohio, talking about some cool ways they're using FreeBSD. So stick around for that. You're going to enjoy it. But of course, we got a lot of news to get to as well. So we should probably jump right into that here. But first up this week, we got a article talking about something that happened a couple weeks back at the Scale conference in Los Angeles. Our very own Drew Levine gave a talk there called Doc Like an Egyptian, which probably should get the reward for the best title ever.
Yes.
For a talk. But specifically on managing project documentation with Sphinx. So if you didn't make it out to Scale or catch her talk, well, she did a great interview with the folks over at opensource.com, in which she kind of gave a little bit of an overview of what the talk was about, and some cool things here, especially if any of you run a project and have to deal with documentation, you may want to learn from some of her experience on this.
Yes.
But in particular, she talks about some of the challenges of running a wiki for the documentation for the PCBSD and FreeNAS projects, and some of the pain points of that, which prompted the shift into using a Sphinx instead for docs. But one of the big pull quotes here from the article, she said, is, while the main purpose of a wiki is to invite user contributions and provide a low barrier to entry, very few people come to write documentation. However, every spam bot on the planet will quickly find your wiki, which creates its own set of maintenance issues. Well, we can vouch for that. We've seen that. But she says, wikis are designed for separate one-ish page info bytes, such as how-tos. They aren't really designed to provide navigation in a table of contents or provide flow of chapters, though you can hack your pages to provide navigational elements to match the document's flow. This, of course, gets difficult as the document increases in size, which our guides tend to be 300 plus pages. I say the PCBSD and FreeNAS guides are quite good. But anyway, she said it becomes a nightmare as you try to provide versioned copies of each of those pages so that the user is finding and reading the right page for their version of software. And I know when we started doing like quarterly releases of PCBSD, that was quickly a very big pain. She continues on, while wiki translation extensions are available and how to configure them is not well documented, their use is often slow and clunky, and translated pages only increases the number of available pages, getting you back to the problems in the previous bullet. This is a big deal for projects that have a global audience. She says, while output generation wiki extensions are available, for example, to convert your wiki pages to HTML or PDF, how to configure them is not well documented, and they provide very little control for the layout of the generated format. This is a big deal for projects that need to make their documentation available in multiple formats. Yeah, definitely. She ran through a lot of pain here doing that, but then she talks a little bit about some of the hurdles they ran into doing the migration from Wiki over to Sphinx, and then follows up with some of the differences for using Sphinx you should be aware of if you're looking at using it for any kind of documentation project. She said, while Sphinx is easy to learn, it does have its quirks. For example, it does not support stacked tags, which means you cannot bold, italic a phrase using tags. To achieve that requires a CSS workaround. And while Sphinx does have extensive documentation, a lot of it assumes you already know what you're doing. When you don't, it can be difficult to find an example that does what you're trying to achieve. Sphinx is well suited for projects with an existing repository, say on GitHub, a build infrastructure, and contributors who are comfortable with using text editors and committing to the repo or creating a Git pull request, for example. So definitely some good stuff in there. This is quite a good article that she did interview here. So if any of you guys are a part of projects or involved with documentation anyway, you may want to take this and just kind of learn from her example here from managing two very large projects and dealing with all the pain.
It's interesting, even with Sphinx, it's still, kind of has a little bit of a barrier to entry in that, you have to be comfortable with editing the markup in a text editor or whatever. But it definitely seems a lot easier than what they were doing before.
Definitely, for sure. So anyway, give that a whirl. I wonder if we'll see other projects switch over to that. Because I know we still have wiki pages, but everyone seems to have their own thing they do for docs. So we'll see what happens. I just know it produces some really nice looking documents and PDFs that we can do on the PCBSD project. So I'm in favor of it. And if it makes Drew happy, go for it.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. Well, next up we have a follow-up story. So touching on a story we mentioned a couple weeks ago, we now have a blog post from Annie over at the FreeBSD Foundation talking about some of the details behind the initial support for RISC-V or RISC-V.
This is
because we didn't really provide too much detail.
No, I didn't.
Just that it landed.
I didn't know much about it. It's like, there's this new open source processor architecture that's going to be open to everybody, and FreeBSD is going to support it. It's like, okay.
Okay, that's all I know.
Ruslan Vukin is a research engineer at the University of Cambridge, has committed the work that he did for the port of FreeBSD to the RISC-V processor, and that series of commits includes user space support and making all the work he's done accessible to everybody.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, if you don't really know what the RISC-V is, first it's an exciting new open source instruction set architecture that's being developed at the University of California, Berkeley. And it's seeing increased interest in the embedded systems and hardware software research community. Yeah. So that's kind of where it got its start.
It's basically an alternative to something like ARM. And instead of having to license a design from ARM, you can just use this open source one.
That's right. So currently it sounds like the improvements that landed in FreeBSD recently allow booting FreeBSD in the Spike simulator, which is also from the University of Berkeley, with enough reliability that they can actually do things now, like run SSH, use the shell, do mail, etc. So it looks like it's working for some value of working. But the next steps going forward in this project are going to include getting multi-core support working, which is going to be very important, and getting it working in simulations of Cambridge University's new open source low-risk system on a chip, which is getting ready for some early hardware, it sounds like, that will be coming out soon. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, once hardware for this actually materializes, FreeBSD will already be very mature on it.
Yeah, that's going to be nice. Hey, we got it before day one. This is kind of cool.
And apparently there will be ports and packages for it as well.
So if you love hacking on brand new architectures, you may want to see if you can get your hands on one of the like the Spike simulator or something where you can start running this and playing with it, maybe contribute a little bit. But the code's already in current, so a big chunk of the work's already done.
Yes, apparently the work was supported by the UK's Higher Education Innovation Fund and DARPA's CTSRD project.
Nice. Okay. Well, next up here we have some follow-up also to some Beehive news that happened a few weeks back, talking about supporting Windows UEFI guests. So we did mention it a while ago that it landed in current, and we have a link here to a commit where it's been backported into 10.3. Or what's going to become 10.3 here very shortly. But this provided a little more details about what exactly was done to make this all happen. So first up, looks like Beehive now supports a UEFI and CSM booting in addition to existing FreeBSD user bootloader and the Grub Beehive.
Yeah, that's what was required to get Windows to work. So now, various versions of Windows Server and Windows 10 and so on all work. They've been tested. The CSM EFI module also means that SmartOS and Illumos work, which I know a bunch of people were waiting for that. And so, that's nice. It's coming along quite nicely.
So as we've mentioned in the past, due to the lack of having kind of graphical stack in Beehive, this still requires that you make a custom ISO to do an unintended install of Windows. But it's not super hard. You can edit and include an XML file to do that. And there's instructions floating around the net, which we'll have up here in a second on how to do that.
Peter's got a thing in this people.freebsd.org site that has the instructions, but it looks like we have an interesting how-to, actually.
Yeah, that's why I included it with this. I thought it would go nicely with this article. But in addition, it looks like the boot ROM can now allocate memory. They've added some new SATA command emulations. Increased the number of VirtIO block and indirect descriptors, added a firmware guest query interface, and a -L option to specify user boot path.
Yes, so if you want to compile your own version of user boot, you can provide a different path instead of having to install it in the default location. This would have been very useful for me working on the ZFS boot menu stuff. I did most of it in VirtualBox because I didn't figure out how to make it work with Beehive, but it turns out somebody else added the feature.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, related to this, we have a link here to an article over at jameslodge.com talking about using the Beehive hypervisor to run Windows Server 2012. And it looks like a nice little how-to that will get you up and running there here. Let me see. I assume you can bring that up on the screen there, Alan, but it looks pretty darn complete on how to get it all set up.
Loading the Beehive kernel module and the null modem module for the serial console. Then they have, actually, looks like Nahani, the company that works with Beehive, has pre-written auto unattended install scripts for Vista, Windows 10, Server 2012, Server 2016, Server 2008, Windows 7, Windows 8 and 8.1, and everything. All you have to do is grab those and add your product key.
Sweet. Okay. Well, this is all getting me excited. I'm actually knee-deep in doing the IOHive API stuff at the moment for our new middleware.
And the other thing you have to integrate into the ISOs if you're using older versions of Windows is the Virtio drivers. So the links for doing that are here as well.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, this is pretty darn complete. So if you're looking to get Windows spun up in a Beehive, you should probably just hit this link and follow the instructions.
But
take some of the mystery out.
It looks quite simple. It's just a matter of extracting the existing ISO, adding in the files you want, and then packaging it up again.
Nice. Okay. So what's this other one? We have a press release here. It looks like TitlesCale's releasing something here.
So TitlesCale, which is a company that's built a commercial product on top of Beehive, officially released their product, I think, yesterday. So this is, they call it a hyperkernel. But basically, they can take multiple physical machines running Beehive and use them to make one supersized VM. So
interesting. So like a cluster CPU?
It kind of, except you can just run your regular operating system and regular software on it. So it just, you just get one VM that appears to have, 256 processors and all the RAM of all your machines put together. So it's...
That is
all the CPUs,
wild.
all the RAM, all the disks, and all the network ports that you define of all the machines in one VM. Yeah, and it can run Linux or FreeBSD.
That is pretty cool. Man, that would make a great build server.
Yeah.
Or put a bunch of those in and just like keep ramping up the size of my Poudre box.
Yeah, that could be pretty interesting.
That is pretty cool. Okay, well, definitely take a look at that if you're interested to hear more. We have a link to the press release here. You can read about what they say. Do we have a? They have their website.
They have a website, and there's some stuff probably on the FreeBSD wiki from when they presented at the vendor summit last November.
Okay, nice. That looks pretty neat. Okay, well, next up here, I guess we have something about loading up a router here, a Cisco box specifically. So what exactly did they do
So this is a tutorial on how to install TACACS, so the Terminal Access Control System Plus, which...
That's a mouthful.
Yes, the access control. I don't know where Cisco got this name. Anyway, it's the
I don't know.
It's the session protocol developed by Cisco, and basically it's how routers authenticate the users that want to connect to them to run administrative commands and so on. And so this tutorial will show you how to install a FreeBSD VM or physical machine and install the TACACS 4 port and configure it so that all of your routers on your network can call this FreeBSD server with this program running and use it as their central authentication server. So, you install this and configure it, and then configure the router. And then when you want to log into the router, when you connect to it, it's like, hey, log in with the username and password. And then the router calls this server you set up and decides if you're allowed to log in or not. And because it does authentication, authorization, and accounting, the TACACS server keeps an audit log of everything that people have done and controls, the username and password, but also what access rights they have. So basically, you can centrally configure what each user is allowed to do on all of the routers in your organization, instead of having to go to each router and configure each user individually. And it's got all the instructions here for setting up FreeBSD, setting up the software on FreeBSD, configuring the router to use the FreeBSD server. And in this case, they actually run the FreeBSD TACACS server in a VM on a Windows machine. So they show you how to network it to your network so all the routers can find it and everything. And yeah, it's a good tutorial if you have a bunch of routers you need to manage in your network.
Oh, pretty slick. I'm sure some network admins would probably appreciate this. You may need to take a look at that, especially if you have, I guess, a Cisco 3700 specifically is what they were using.
That's what they use in the example, but TACACS is pretty common across the whole Cisco platform.
Okay. Nice. Okay, we'll definitely check that out. Okay, that brings us right up to the point where we got to do an interview. But before we get to that, of course, we want to mention the first sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems. And the URL for that, ixsystems.com/BSDNow, where, of course, you want to go and talk to those guys and let them build your next system of awesomeness. Of course, powered by great, awesome Intel processors. We can't forget that as well. So, yeah, you definitely want to go talk to them. And it could be something small, it could be something big. Maybe you just need a little FreeNAS mini.
I'm literally waiting for the doorbell to ring. As my next IX machine gets here.
See, so we may have some live excitement today where Alan rushes off frantically, it's here, and then comes lugging a huge box back, right? Or is it going to go right down to the basement?
It'll probably go right to the basement, but I guess if it happens during the show, I suppose I could drag it in here.
You should at least bring it in so we can see the box and the pretty IX logo and stuff. That would be quite interesting.
So, if we want to start doing GPU-based transcoding for a new client at Scale Engine, and we needed... we're not sure if it's going to work with the newer processors or if we have to buy older ones, because even the Linux drivers aren't very good for these graphics. So
this is like the test one.
So we're like, hey IX, so we want one of these new Skylake servers, which aren't that easy to get yet, and we need it rushed to us as quickly as possible so that we can figure out if it's going to work. So we can decide if the next 4 we buy should be Ivy Ridge or Haswell, or sorry. Skylake or Haswell.
Or Skylake.
Because we really like the Skylakes because they're faster for the same amount of money, basically.
But you just got to prove it works.
So I have to make sure the software that we're going to run on it is actually going to work with the CPU. And so I got, I was very glad that IX was able to get a very specific processor because I didn't want just any Skylake Xeon. I needed like the 1275 V5 that has the GPU built in. Not many of the Xeons have the GPU built in, like the desktop and laptop processors. But I needed a specific one. And with Skylake, availability is not that great yet. They're still filtering out of the factories and so on. But IX managed to get me one and assemble it quicker than normal and get it shipped to me ASAP. And
see, that's fantastic, and that's just for a test unit. Come on, imagine what they're going to do with your full order.
Well, the full order is going to get even crazier because it's like, one of them needs to be shipped to Portland, and one of them needs to be shipped to Fremont, and the other 2 need to go to Canada, and all kinds of things like that. So it's being able to just talk to them and explain what I need and have them do that little bit extra to go out of the way to help me. Made a big difference. But also just, at first I wasn't sure what I wanted. I'm like, I don't know. Give me some options. I need, a small 1U server that, I get some kind of GPU in, or I need like a 4U machine that can fit some big video cards in it with a smallish processor. Or maybe if the video cards are going to be kind of expensive, maybe I'm better off with just going... the full really big CPUs instead of GPUs. Although probably not, because when you get all the way up there to like the dual E5 2680s and 2690s, you're talking $2,000 or $3,000 per processor.
Oh man!
But yeah, that's like 16 cores each times 2 physical packages. So they're crazy. But anyway, IX was able to help me out and rush the machine when I needed it, which made a big difference for me. Now, if FedEx can just manage to get it through customs, it'll be fine.
That is true. That is the trick, right? Well, hey, the good news is you can get the same level of awesomeness delivered to either your home, like Alan's doing, or to wherever your place of business is. Just need to get in touch with the guys over at IX and let them make that happen for you. So again, ixsystems.com/BSDNow. And of course, let them know that we sent you, and we'll be excited to bring you Alan's unboxing of this new system if it happens live. We can just hope and pray that FedEx shows up in time. We're joined today by Nick Wolff, who's a routing engineer, is here to talk to us a little bit about the crazy stuff they do with BSD in their environment. So first of all, Nick, we appreciate you being here today. Thanks for taking the time to come on here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, great. Well, since this is your first time here, give us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your story. How did you first get introduced to BSD?
So I've only been using BSD since about 2012. I think quite a few years before that, I started with Linux. And then in college, actually, I got a job where I'm working at now, Ornet, at the Ohio State University. And they use a FreeBSD infrastructure. So, at first my introduction was just at a terminal level. Everything seemed very, very similar. And over time, as I worked here and went from a student to a full-time position, I've actually now running the FreeBSD infrastructure. And I guess, that was my progression. It's very great. I've got a very smart boss here who developed everything before I did. And then I've solely basically been taking over the reins of day-to-day management and new installs, all the new stuff.
Nice. Okay.
Cool. So what do you actually use BSD for right now?
So our majority of usage is for our servers. So we're an ISP for education, state government, things like that. So all of these services that you need to run, that if they're not running, people would think the network was down. So DNS, management tools for our workers, so places to SSH into and SSH out of, a large amount of monitoring backends. So we run Nagios, and we just have a ton of self-built tools to tie all of this together to get our, all of our Juniper routers and switches and all of that managed well.
Okay. So you're going to tell us a bit about how your network management infrastructure is set up. So tell us about, I guess, how it started, what exactly you guys use it for. I guess you touched a little bit on that, but
yeah,
go into a little more depth there on that.
Yeah. So we have, right now we're migrating to a FreeBSD 10 based infrastructure.
Okay.
We have servers spread out across our whole entire state, which is one of the things that, causes it to be a little bit different to manage. We have to set up all these servers so that we can just send them out in the field, bring them up, and we don't actually, have network connectivity or manageability until they're, fully booted. I'm sorry, can you say which part of that exactly are you asking about again? Sorry.
Well, we're asking more about, I guess, the general infrastructure setup. So I guess you mentioned things are spread apart. You're moving to 10.0 or 10.2 or?
Yeah, we're moving. We're currently running around 10.1. I think technically, since we build everything internally, and we actually track stable. It's a 10.1 pre-release, which will soon become whatever point we're at now. 10.2, hopefully relatively soon.
Sure.
We compile everything from source, both the OS and the and all software on top of that. Hopefully in the future we'll have a chance to move to Poudriere. That's just very important of us for stability reasons. A slight change in ports can break configs and cause other issues. So we have a set of servers at the edge set up as bastion hosts that our people can SSH into. From there, we have a variety of other servers to run all the different services. We're a little bit unique that everything I feel we're more unique nowadays that everything runs on bare metal. And almost every single box is single purpose. So our DNS servers only do DNS. our external web servers, which we have a few of, only do that. Our NTP servers only do that. That way, when we do have hardware failures, it doesn't lead to a lot of cascading situations. It's very simple to deal with.
Okay. So you said some of your clients, I guess, are the state of Ohio and universities and whatnot. So what exactly are they using your network for? Transit out to the internet or interlink connectivity?
Our network is used by actually the majority of the educational institutes here in Ohio.
Okay.
They use it for transit to the internet, transit to Internet 2, communications with each other. We're currently expanding to link all of these state agencies back to the state to kind of serve as a middleman between the state agencies and all of the subcarriers that do all of the actual last mile work. We serve as a backbone, so we connect all the major cities with 100 gig infrastructure. Actually, interestingly enough, talking about that, we actually then have 200 gig connections out to Internet 2 and more 10 gig connections out to different providers than I can count to account for all of our bandwidth.
Jeez, okay.
That sounds interesting. So do you have IPv6 on all that as well?
We have IPv6 spread across our backbone, and we are running it on our DNS servers and our monitoring systems. We currently don't have it deployed on that many of our other servers, just there really isn't a great reason. But, our DNS, for example, is fully reachable over IPv4 and IPv6.
Is it one of those things when the demand's there, then you guys will probably flip it and turn it on everywhere else?
Yeah, it's a mix of that, and just as time comes around and as upgrades go around, I've been working very heavily on our FreeBSD 10 infrastructure. I believe we started around FreeBSD 4. I know we have systems that are that old, and I know we made stops at 6 and again at 8, which is what a lot of our current hardware is on. So I've been working really hard during our FreeBSD 10 migration to get rid of as many of our own individual little workarounds as possible and to integrate as much of the mainstream and even hopefully potentially give stuff back to the community just so we have less to maintain and just to make it easier in the future to keep up to date.
Yeah, yeah, we always love to see more of that. Especially glad now that reviews.freebsd.org is open to anybody. They can go and post their patches up there, and they tend to have a better chance of getting committed that way than when they get lost in a PR. So what's interesting or different about your setup? Like you mentioned that all your machines are remote, so obviously that brings a bunch of new challenges and so on.
Yeah, so basically we try to stick to simplify everything. We try to treat all of our systems the same. So I try to treat the systems that I have a good amount of systems that are just down the street, but then I have some that are in POPs that we need a week's notice to get access to if it's not an emergency, and some are a 2.5-hour drive away. And I've got to either get one of our install engineers to make the drive or do it myself. So we rely very heavily on serial access and also on managed power strips, so that if everything worst comes to worst, we can power cycle the box remotely. We actually are using a PC sysinstall out of PCBSD as an installer. I just found it a lot nicer to do automated installs off of. I felt, BSD install, is that the current one?
Yep.
Is a wonderful box of Legos to work from, but it seems to always be a box of Legos. You always have to kind of, if you want to go to the step of customization, it seems very all or nothing. While PC sysinstall is very simple for me to make a few minor modifications to, and then most of our day-to-day stuff is just changing the config file. Each individual install. And I have shell scripts that provision our systems, basically just modifying the IP addresses and loading different base configs. So it takes me 10 minutes to get a box out in the field, or 10 minutes to get the USB stick built to then install it.
Okay, really nice. Well, I guess you do a lot of transit. Do you do anything with storage? You use ZFS at all, or you guys use UFS?
All of our new FreeBSD 10 stuff is ZFS, and I'm absolutely loving it. Doing the snapshots and everything makes everything so much easier. Not having to pull full backups when somebody just deleted a single file or wiped it out or something is wonderful. We also are using Life Preserver to do backups with ZFS because previously we were using dump, and that really doesn't work anymore.
Sure.
So that was a great tool to use to do that, and it's actually great. I think you or somebody else, actually introduced me to that last year.
I may have it. BSD can. Yeah.
And I've got it fully, since then I've got it fully up and running and being used in production. And actually, hopefully, I should have some patches coming back for that. I made one patch to use OpenSSL to encrypt the configuration details. Currently, backing up the configuration details, use Jelly, and you need to supply a password at the time you're doing it. Using OpenSSL, SMIME, and public keys, basically we're able to back up the backup details and securely email them off the box, so that we don't need any real work there to do that.
Send me those. I need those patches. Yeah. Send me that. That sounds neat.
Yeah, that, and I'm looking at writing a service for our other systems to be able to talk to our backup boxes, and basically provision these evals that they back up onto, because right now, we've got to go in and manually add them.
Sure. Okay, how do you, what are you backing up to? FreeNAS boxes or just other FreeBSD?
No, our self-built or ordered FreeBSD servers just from resellers. Actually, Intel boxes, I think it's actually relatively small. I think it's like a 6x4 ZFS RAID Z2 setup. And I'm looking, if I have to expand, I'm probably going to throw a directly attached storage underneath and, do another RAID Z2.
Nice. All right. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say that's one of the other things I like about Life Preserver is I'm going to be able to expand with a completely different Z pool just by pointing it at a different spot on the disk for the Z-vols.
Sure.
So I'm really looking like it's going to scale well.
Have you actually tried to restore yet using PC sysinstall's Life Preserver restorability?
I haven't currently used that because I don't save it in quite an identical format. Okay. I have S-Tunnel loaded onto all of our install images or disks. And what I'm actually saving right now is basically the set of commands you would have to run to mount the jelly.
Sure.
And, rebuild like that.
Okay. Very cool. So I guess since everything's being done remotely here, any unique challenges working with all remote servers like that with FreeBSD?
The issue is just that reliability is key. Making sure everything is planned ahead of time, because we're supposed to have the ability to power cycle something. But for example, one time I accidentally mounted a new file system over Etsy because I somehow hit a E instead of an M and tab completed and hit enter. Whoops. And that system wasn't connected to a remote network power strip. So I had to physically drive down there. Luckily, that was just downtown, so it's just a good 15-minute drive to go reboot that.
Could have been worse.
So it really just comes down to engineering and making sure that we account for as much as possible as early as possible. Because when you don't, is when somebody's driving across the state. FreeBSD has been a great help for that. I don't think we'd be able to manage an infrastructure of our size with anything else as easily.
Yeah, okay. I've had some interesting issues where one of my network power strips lost its management interface. Like it just has a big E instead of an IP address or something. And
yeah, we deal with that kind of stuff all the time.
What are the advantages of actually using FreeBSD instead of something else?
I think our biggest advantage, as I was talking about earlier, is just the stability and the simplicity of it all. Within the last 2 years, I felt that I have gotten a really good grasp of FreeBSD.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot that I understand that I totally is beyond me, but in that amount of time, I'm able to build it from source, understand the install process well enough to rewrite it to do what our needs are. Be able to understand, the proper backing up stuff and being able to customize everything really to the point that it is super stable and is not just, simple out of the box, do this, do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think a lot of systems tend to be.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what would you say maybe is your biggest pain point with FreeBSD, something you wish would change?
I think my biggest pain point, honestly, that's a really hard one. I've not run into many issues. My biggest pain point is probably, and I haven't delved as deep as I want to, is probably just the whole the fact that I do not feel that I can trust packages as a stable enough stuff. There have been, what I mean by that is there have been improvements with I think there's the quarterly package tree now.
Mm-hmm.
But just, as an ISP where our main thing is stability, we, a lot of times we only want security updates.
Sure.
And that's nothing against, packages. That's more towards just our needs.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is getting a lot better. I think we're going to be able to migrate to Poudriere and just use a cleaned set of the ports tree just to build what we need and have more control over the exact versions,
Mm-hmm.
which will, not to say what I'm doing now isn't painful. What I'm doing now with building all software from source by hand is horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, we need to make that migration. And, it's getting a lot better. I've been hearing a lot better things about the updates and all that stuff with packages. So I'm really excited for that. But that's probably honestly my biggest pain point is that we still have to figure out a solution that gives us the stability we want while having still the flexibility.
Yeah, sure.
And also probably updating the OS as a whole is probably the other one, which I think is also getting worked on.
Yeah, so for the packages at Scale Engine, what we have is our own Poudriere, and we basically pick a point of the ports tree where everything is working how we want, build that and ship that for a while, and then at some point we're motivated to build a new snapshot, get it working, and then push all the packages to that. And the upgrade works. Even if it didn't, we just delete every package and let the machine reinstall the packages it knows it wants from its manifest with Puppet or whatever, and it's back up and going again. So we've been very lucky with using Poudriere.
Yeah, I really think that that's the way to go, and it's definitely a good solution. I just haven't had time to implement it.
The nice thing with Poudriere is it's actually really easy to set up. You build you tell it to build a jail for each different version of FreeBSD you have out in your infrastructure.
Yeah, I do have a test version currently that I'm looking at building for some of our Nano BSD instances.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So what features would you like to see FreeBSD get to make your life easier?
Probably honestly the biggest one is the packaging of base that's been discussed to make updates really easy. Right now we reinstall every time we do a base update, which isn't a huge deal for us because I guess the big thing I didn't mention before was that we are tons of services but very few people that use stuff directly. We have very few, we don't have external users. Everybody that logs in via shell is, an employee. But hopefully, when the package base comes along, that'll be very helpful.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us waiting for some kind of packaging of base to happen. That would be nice. So I know since you're using ZFS, have you tried boot environments yet? Do you use that anywhere?
Not yet, mostly because, as I said, we're currently updating reinstalling every time we do a major update. It's just our software that we update more frequently in other ways.
Okay.
Yeah, well, with ZFS boot environments, you basically, it's just a snapshot before you replace it and you can roll back. The way I'm looking at doing it for us, actually, is to be able to push OS updates out to our servers as a new ZFS dataset. So we basically build the updated system and just ZFS send it to every one of our servers, and they would then have that as a new boot environment that they would boot off of. And if it doesn't work, they can always go back to their older one. So
that's definitely very interesting, and I would love to hear if you get anywhere with that.
The biggest one there is just trying to separate out /etc so it can be separate, but still keep it up to date. But I think ECC update will be good enough for that. But basically, you end up kind of almost like EasyJail, basejail type concept where bin, sbin, user sbin, etc. are almost read only, and then every time I push a OS update, I'm just overwriting those with the latest, greatest version kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool.
So do you have time to play with FreeBSD in your spare time at all?
Yeah, I guess my biggest thing lately, and I need to get back to this because I have made some quasi-promises to people. There's a toy called not really a toy, but there's something called the Blade RF, which is an SDR, a software-defined radio. And around DEF CON last year, I was working with the guys at Noon who created it to get it ported to FreeBSD. I've got the patches in their tree to get it to compile. I have port stuff put together to get it into ports. The only issue is that it currently doesn't actually function on FreeBSD. So I haven't, pushed in the ports until that's fixed.
Sure.
I'm really getting to learn more about libUSB than I ever wanted to.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys are aware, FreeBSD is about the only thing that ships their own. Everything else just has a compiled version, but FreeBSD has a API compatible version in the kernel itself.
Okay, so any hobbies outside of BSD when you're not hacking on that?
Not a whole lot. Work and school take up a lot of it.
Okay.
I have a Jeep that I love to work on when I have time. But actually, now that it's a new Jeep, it really doesn't need much done.
Right.
So
that's
that's
a good problem to have.
money and little toys and stuff. Yeah.
And does it have one of those little dashboard computers? Because that's running BSD in there, and then you have a whole new cross between your passions.
Not yet. I've looked at that a few times. Yeah, it will probably happen one of these days.
We had a story a couple months ago of like the stock one that comes in some of the newer ones has a software information thing where they have all the copyright notices that you have to have because of the BSD license, and we were trying to figure out which version of BSD it was running.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm actually really interested in, I guess the other thing is getting involved in more of the embedded stuff. I don't know if you guys have heard of the chip.
No, but I have the
$9 computer. It's very, similar to Raspberry Pi, except for it's cheaper. And I bought a bunch on the Kickstarter. So I've been looking at porting FreeBSD. I just really haven't had the time to really delve into it.
I have this one, the Onion Omega. It's actually only this part. The rest of it's a dock, but I've been playing with that a bit too. It's MIPS, basically the same idea though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Was there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's really it. Thanks for having me on here, guys.
Yes, thank
Hopefully I had something interesting
Okay.
we're talking about.
You're planning on coming up to BSD Can this year?
Yeah, I submitted a talk, what was that, 2 nights ago now?
Okay.
23 hours before the deadline.
Well,
You were probably ahead of a lot of people.
Oh yeah, I hit that point. I'm like, this is good. This is, so.
That's
great.
We look forward to seeing you.
Hopefully, if there's any interest there, I'll be talking about our transition from FreeBSD 8 to FreeBSD 10, and more of what it took, and all of our own internal things that we were able to get rid of and use what the community has now.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'll be interested in hearing about some of those.
Yeah, it's really interesting looking back at it, how many problems that everybody must really have but it isn't until somebody speaks up and everybody else goes, "Oh yeah, I run into that every day."
Yeah.
Yep.
Then you find out everyone else has had these workarounds or solutions, and it just takes somebody to push it into the tree so we all have something to work on.
Yep.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for spending the time to be with us today, Nick. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you.
Great. And we'll look forward to seeing you in a few months at BSD Can. Okay, back from the interview. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely some neat stuff they're doing up in the state of Ohio there with FreeBSD, and we wish them all the luck with that. So, of course, we have a news roundup to get to and plenty more show ahead. But before we get into that, of course, we need to mention another sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean. Website for that, of course, is digitalocean.com. There's no fancy /BSDNow or anything. Just go right to the website, create an account, and the way we can get a little tracking here showing that, hey, you heard about it on BSD Now is when you create your account, don't forget to use the coupon code FreeBSDNow, which will give you a $10 credit, which is awesome. Now, don't complain if it doesn't work. If you have an old account and you've already redeemed another code, then
Yes,
it's not
you can't get infinite free
$10.
$10.
Yes, you can't stack these. So one done. But if you haven't done it yet, or you're creating an account for the first time, definitely don't forget FreeBSD Now. $10 credit. I mean, that's good for 2 months of running a VM.
Yep.
So you really want to do that because that'll give you a lot of time to play with the service, play with the VM, figure out what you're going to do up there before it even starts costing you anything, which is pretty stinking cool.
Yep. And you can set it up with where you put the money in your account first. So like prepaid type setup, so that you can control your costs. You know, you're not going to get an unexpectedly big bill because you put the money in first, and when it runs out, then you get when it gets low, you get warned about it, and when it runs out, then you just turn your VMs off. But you know, that's better than go over to Amazon and do some stuff and forget to turn something off, and then you get a bill for $500.
Oh man, yeah, no fun.
Exactly.
Well, definitely check out DigitalOcean. Everything's backed by SSDs,
Super
so
fast.
It's going to be super stinking quick. Yeah, makes those VMs just scream. Of course, they start at the $5 a month VMs that are up all the time. You can also pay, was it hourly,
Yes.
I believe,
Yep.
Yep. So you can do hourly. If you're only going to spin it up, do something, and shut her down, and come back later. You can programmatically do that as well. So they have a nice API they expose. So if you want to programmatically spin up VMs or take things up and down and only pay for what you use, that's definitely a possibility. Nice. And DigitalOcean has some of the best documentation I've seen on showing how to do these things as well. Which that's worth. You don't pay anything for that documentation, but that's worth its weight in gold, believe me. When you're trying to figure out how to do something, just the time saved. I know when I was, first thing I had to look up was, okay, I have one VM. I want to run a bunch of jails. What's the recommended way of setting that up? And they're like, oh, we'll do this. And it was like copy, paste, config, 5 minutes, done, right? I didn't have to go figure anything out. It was already right there in their docs, which will make it easy for you to do the same.
Like anything good, there's a whole community around it. And that's where the strength comes from. Is having this community of people that are sharing the documentation and working on stuff. They have documentation for Let's Encrypt and all kinds of other stuff too.
That's right. So again, digitalocean.com. Check them out today. Okay, so something me and Alan are a little jealous of because we just found out about this and it's too late for us, but maybe if you're in the New York area, you're not. But the folks over at New York City Bug have pointed us over to a link called Papers We Love and a New York-based meetup group where past papers are presented. Well, they have a talk scheduled for tomorrow night, February the 11th at 7 p.m. with Brian Cantrill discussing jails in Solaris Zone.
Right, so
just sounds great.
From what I gather, this meetup group is just presentations of cool papers, even if they're not necessarily new. And they've managed, since Brian Cantrell's in town for the New York City Container Summit, he stayed over an extra night to come to this meetup, and he's going to present Paul Hennenkamp and Robert Watson's paper Jails, Confining the Omnipotent Root, and the Solaris Zone paper by Dan Price and Andy Tucker.
Oh,
so yeah, cool. He's actually going to present these classic academic papers on where containers actually came from, and importantly how jails came first. So
if you're in New York City, it looks like it's going to be 7 p.m. at the Tumblr building, located between 5th and Park Avenue South on 21st Street. So give you a rough idea there. Of course, you can go hit up the link in the show notes. Now, if you're watching this, what is it, tomorrow night? Yeah. Maybe you catch it before it starts. But Try and make it out to this. That sounds really cool. Again, we're a little jealous.
They mentioned there won't be a live stream, but they are recording it, and they will tweet out about it once it's up, and I definitely look forward to seeing that.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Yeah, we will definitely bring you the video when it shows up so we can all enjoy some more brand control. I'm sure it'll be entertaining. Yes. Okay, so what's next, John? We got a storage summit happening. You're going to be going to that? Okay. Cool.
Yes. So the FreeBSD Foundation has organized a storage summit co-located at the Usenix FAST conference. That's the File Systems and Storage Technology conference. So, a lot of people that are already doing stuff with storage and operating systems and so on, and file systems are going to be at this conference anyway. So it was a great time to have a storage summit. So unlike some of our other dev summits, this one will be more hackathon focused. We're actually working on it and fixing problems as opposed to just a big discussion or something. And so it's February 22nd, which is, and it's in the hotel where FAST is going to be hosted. And basically after everybody arrives and we set up, there will be, introductions and so on, and then a networking synergies panel, which is mostly talking about how networking and storage fit together. And, there's been a lot of change going on lately in the storage or the networking stack and maybe some in the storage stack and how we can better make those things work together. I'm sure, Netflix knows a bit about getting bits off the storage and out the network.
I would imagine. I'd imagine so.
And so after a break, after that panel, we'll break into working groups. One of the working groups is on CAM scheduling and locking. That'll be led by Justin Gibbs. They're talking about updating the CAM queuing and scheduling and the locking models to minimize cross-CPU contention and support multi-queued controllers. I know, for example, Scott Long from Netflix has been working on a multi-queue version of the driver for some of the LSI storage cards that all the hard drives are connected to. And that's what I use on my servers as well. And so it'd be very handy to, so that working group will be working on sorting out the issues with that and trying to advance that. And then Matt Ahrens will be leading a ZFS working group, which I'll be at. And we're not decided everything we'll talk about yet, but some of the stuff we want to talk about is OpenZFS added support for new hashing algorithms for checksums, including SHA-512 truncated to 256 bits, which it's basically the same strength of checksum that you get from a SHA-256, but on 64-bit hardware, especially like x86 hardware, calculating a SHA-512 and then only using the first half of it is actually 50% faster than calculating the SHA-256 because the word size is 64 bits. It matches with the CPU.
Okay. That makes sense.
So,
cool.
Basically increasing the performance of using the SHA-256 checksum. And then the other checksum is Skeen, which is Bruce Schneier's checksum that he submitted. Eventually wasn't picked to be SHA-3, but one of its advantages is, unlike the SHA-256 stuff, its endianness matches up with x86, so it's all optimized to be as fast as possible on x86, not necessarily every platform. But that one should be even faster, and it also supports a per pool seed, so that you can defend against possible attacks against deduplication. Anyway, both of those are in OpenZFS and in Solaris, but FreeBSD's kernel doesn't have implementations of those hashing algorithms, so they don't actually work on FreeBSD yet. I've finished one for SHA-256, or SHA-512 truncated 256, because it's mostly just reading the standard and applying the changes to the SHA-512 code. But I'd have to, I'd like to get some advice on actually implementing the Bruce Schneier's thing into FreeBSD as well, so that we can have those. And then there's lots of other ZFS features, and it'll be interesting to, I imagine we probably talk a bit about SMR, about NVMe, and all the other storage stuff that's coming up.
Well, here's a question somebody will probably be curious to know. Can you change checksum types on the fly?
Yes. Part of the metadata includes which checksum it used. So if you change the checksum on the fly, any new data is written with the new checksum, and the old data is checked with the old checksum. So there's a flag that indicates which one you used. So, and I think there's support for a total of 32 before we have to change anything in the way ZFS works. So we're good to add a bunch more without any problems.
32 ought to be fine forever.
Well, no.
I'm going to have my Bill Gates moment there, right?
Well, at some point when we get the limit, we'll probably just decide that nobody uses, Fletcher 4 anymore.
Yeah, just start removing
or something.
things. Replace it. Yeah.
By then, hopefully, what we will want is a block pointer that can fit a larger checksum. The reason why we don't just use SHA-512 is that the block pointer only has room for the 256 bits of checksum. And then
I wonder if that'll be a change in the future.
that'll be in the future at some point, but that will basically change the on-disk format. So that's one of those big things. Like that would actually change us from V5000 to like V5001. That's a big jump. And then George Neville Neal will be leading a user space storage stack group to, I guess, emulate storage and user space and do interesting things with it, which could be quite interesting for just modeling and figure out how it works and so on. Anyway, if you're a vendor or a developer and you're going to be at FAST or anywhere near Santa Clara, California, you should definitely check this out. Registration is open to developers, and you can email a developer if you'd like to attend as a guest. Cool. I know
everyone's going to email.
Obviously, IX will be there. FlightAware, Pandas, Seagate, and other people are coming. I expect to see quite a few storage vendors, actually. It'd be interesting to see some of the Intel people I saw at the ZFS Dev Summit to be there, actually. But
interesting.
Hopefully, we have lots of good results come out of this, being more of a hackathon-focused thing rather than just discussion-focused.
I wonder if this is one where we can get some interviews specifically about ZFS or...
time might be a bit tight, but I might be able to do that on the Tuesday or maybe just after dinner.
That might be cool. I imagine there's going to be some interesting folks there we haven't talked to yet. I'm just looking at the list here. Yeah, you could definitely squeeze a couple interviews out of these, probably. Yep. Okay, well, next up we have a Tor browser. We've talked, it's been months now, I think, since we've really talked about it. But the Tor browser diversity project is still a thing, and they are now pleased to announce that the Tor browser version 5.5 is out for OpenBSD. So I guess Tor browser, of course, is in development mode and is not meant to necessarily ensure strong privacy, anonymity, or security. So take it with a grain of salt. This is still testing, but definitely it is available. You want to tell us a little more about this?
So,
I think you wrote the notes on this.
So this is basically a browser bundle to run a modified browser on OpenBSD and built in with Tor. But it comes from the Tor BSD Diversity Project. The goal of this project is to increase the security of the Tor network by increasing the diversity of the nodes. Currently, most of the relays run Linux. And you know, that's not necessarily a good thing. So their goal is to try to get more relays running OpenBSD and FreeBSD and NetBSD and Dragonfly and so on, so that if, one flaw can't take out the entire or a majority of the Tor network. And then the browser project is obviously to increase diversity on the user side of Tor as well. And, OpenBSD seems like a good base for a secure browser distro if you're really looking for the privacy, anonymity, and security.
Makes sense.
All the source code for their stuff is up on their GitHub at TorBSD.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely check that out. Help them test it. So hopefully they can get down to debug mode here before too long and make that the official deal. And of course, if you can run a relay, I'm sure they'd appreciate that as well. Okay, now a little bit of a follow-up from another story we talked about. We had brought you news in the past about how you could sponsor the new advanced ZFS book that Michael W. Lucas is working on with our very own Alan.
If you want your name in the credits in the ebook or the print version at the back of the book, the slots are still available.
You can do that. You can do that. But Michael has posted something up on his site giving us a little tease here of the tentative chapter layout of this soon sure to be a classic tome coming from him and Alan. So without further ado, here's what it looks like you guys are up to. So we got, of course, the introduction. First one is boot environments. I'm actually surprised you guys let off with this.
Yeah,
cool.
Well, it's one of the things people ask about most often. And
okay. Very slick, very slick. Number 2, delegation in jails.
Yeah, so that's allowing users to manage parts of ZFS or putting it, delegating an entire data set to jail so that root in the jail can do whatever they want with it, but can't affect the host system.
Okay. Chapter 3 is going to be on sharing, which I imagine
everything that's Samba, iSCSI, NFS, everything you think of.
Okay. Chapter 4, replication.
That I think is the thickest chapter in the book.
Interesting.
It's like...
Do you cover tools, or is this all just doing it like native command, ZFS
we do cover ZX for a few tools, but mostly it's about the concepts and understanding what's happening.
Sure.
I think it's like... Yeah, it's like 20% of the book.
Oh gosh, okay. That's a good sized chapter.
Well, it's one of the most useful bits of ZFS, right?
That's true. That is true. Chapter 5, we have a ZVols.
Yep. There's lots of interesting things that happen here, especially with like RAID Z padding and what happens when you use really small blocks with a really high parity.
Okay. Chapter 6, we have advanced hardware.
Yes, so
what's that exactly?
If you have multipath, or if you're just using SES, the SCSI enclosure management services, a little bit about like NVMEs, special tips for SSDs. I cover some stuff on just various bits of HBAs like the MPS and MPR and so on. The different controller cards you might have, and just basic information for dealing with the stuff more advanced than plugging a couple hard drives into the SATA ports on your home computer.
Sure. Okay. Chapter 7, you got caches.
Yes. ZFS has quite a few different caches when you come to think about it.
Yes.
So, obviously the ARC and tuning it, setting the minimum and the maximum, what percentage of it should be metadata, controlling it so it doesn't take over your whole system, but still getting the most out of it you can. And,
Yep. And then chapter 8, of course, performance. Yes. I'm sure that's going to be a good one.
So lots of questions. So the performance chapter is mostly about measuring what's actually happening. And then the next chapter is about changing it.
Tuning, yep. Number 9 is tuning. Yep. And then lastly, we have ZFS potpourri. So what is
all
that?
All the little things that didn't deserve a whole chapter.
Okay.
There's tons of little tips, and it's like, oh, yes, look what you can do with the ZDB command, or here's how to figure out, why this is working, or lots of different things.
Well, great. Well, in addition to them teasing us about the upcoming book, Michael's actually asked the community for assistance in coming up with some cover art for it as well. And in particular, he wants it to be in line with his previous work, so probably a parody of some sort of classic artwork would be fitting. So if you have something, you should probably go tweet that out to him at MWL Author on Twitter. I actually looked at his contact us page on his site. Have you ever done that before, Alan? Don't email me. I don't even answer emails from my mother. And if I answered one, then she'd get upset because how come I answered you and not her? And blah, blah, blah. It was actually pretty funny. That's worth a read if you have the time.
Plus,
typical Michael W.
Yes. Plus, his email address domain is like blackhelicopter.org or something like that.
Yeah. So maybe you want to hit up the Twitter route. But if you have an idea of a cool classic artwork that they could beastify and do something neat with for ZFS, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, so we did that for the first ZFS book, and we had some classic art about riding bicycles, like when bicycles were first invented, and they replaced the focal character with Beastie, and that worked really well. But for the specialty file system book, he did a wraparound cover where the art actually goes across the spine and onto the back cover too, and he'd like to do that again.
Like you said, he wanted to do that with this one too.
It was very popular, so hopefully we can find some nice classic art. So if you have any ideas of something that would fit, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, we got a bunch of Beastie bits and some feedback and questions we're going to get to here in just a moment. But of course, we want to mention the last sponsor this week, which is going to be TarSnap, where you can go to tarsnap.com/BSDNow and get an account created in just under a minute or so. Come on, how long does it take you to type in email address, set a password, and some of those things? Pretty darn simple. And once you've got your account created, you can put a few bucks in there and be amazed how far that'll take you in the future, especially if you're backing up something that's not changing a lot. I mean, you're only going to pay for the new bits, not the old. And of course, you can always delete the old as you go forward. But tarsnap's going to make it all super simple. If you know how to use the tar command on the command line, you've ever done anything like that, well, you're 90% of the way there already. It's very, very similar. So it makes it really easy to work with. And of course, this isn't a BSD only thing. They have clients for Windows, Linux, Mac. I mean, you name it, they've probably got a client for it, right? I mean, if they go to the trouble to roll a Siglin one, that's crazy. They got clients for everything. But of course, you don't have to download a binary because you can grab the source and compile it yourself. Be extra paranoid just to make sure that you're running exactly what you're supposed to be. So Tarsnap, I think, the only backup solution out there that'll let you do that, which is pretty stinking cool. Anything you want to throw on there, Alan? I don't know if you're showing the page or not.
And it just works. I don't know. I've been using it for over a year now and have been extremely satisfied.
Yeah, cron job and done.
Exactly.
It just does what it's supposed to do.
I very much like not having to think about it.
That's right. You just know that it's off doing its
thing. I get an
thing.
invoice once a month that tells me no need to pay us for 10 more years.
That's right. So check it out today, folks, at tarsnap.com/BSDNow. And of course, if you talk to anyone, let them know that you heard it here. Okay, so first up in the Beastie Bits, we have Asia BSD Con. It looks like the registration is going to be open soon.
Yes. Probably in
the next 24
The email
hours.
I got last night said next 24 hours. So hopefully by the time this episode is released, you'll be able to go and register on the website. And they will have the schedule. So next week, we will hopefully be telling you all about the schedule and all the great stuff that will be happening at Asia BSD Con.
Great, something to look forward to. Wow, that's only about a month away now.
Yeah. Actually, less than a month before I have to get on the airplane because I leave on the 7th to get there.
Yeah. I think 7th or 8th here or something like that. I think I leave Monday.
Yes, Monday the 7th.
I always get confused because you arrive the next day.
So that's why I leave on the Monday so that I get there on the Tuesday. Because I know my first or second year that caused me a bunch of grief because it was when I booked it on the travel site, it was trying to make the hotel reservation for the day I flew, but I wouldn't actually arrive till the next day. So it's the hotel cancels your reservation if you don't show up the first night.
Oh, no.
Right, so luckily I fixed it all. But yes, Michael Dexter also mentions that as part of the night before the conference officially starts for AsiaBSDCon, so it'll be the Friday night.
Michael, I got it in the notes. You're covered.
Okay. Oh,
it's right
nice.
there. I inserted it while we were messing around.
Awesome. So yes, if you're going to be at AsiaBSDCon, definitely also check out BeehiveCon, which will be basically in the evening after the AsiaBSDCon tutorials, the night before the actual talks start at AsiaBSDCon. And there will be a bunch of presentations from various people that are working on or with Beehive or related virtualization. So it's anything with BSD and virtualization. So there'll be a presentation about Zen, a presentation about OpenBSD's VMM, a presentation about Beehive on ARM, and you'll be talking about sysad and Beehive.
How we do the IOHive API, like WebSockets and REST and all that, exposing that. So you can do Beehive remotely. That'll be fun.
Yeah, so
looking forward to it. Now I gotta make slides now though. Like I thought I was out of not having to do a talk in Tokyo.
Well, BeehiveCon's slightly more informal.
You
don't have to write a 10-page academic paper, and
we're gonna have fun. It's gonna be good. I might even walk through the code, showing you how in like 24 lines of code you can add an entire new API call to our tool and how simple it is. We're just cranking them out right now.
Yes.
So that ought to be fun. We're going to enjoy that.
Also, BeehiveCon is looking for another sponsor in like the $250 range to help provide refreshments and so on during BeehiveCon.
Okay. Great. So if you can help with that, definitely get in touch with Michael Dexter or go on the website, find the contact info, and let them know. I know he'd appreciate it. Okay, so what's this up about New York City bug? They got some shell food talk slides?
So they had a talk last week about shell foo doing interesting things with the shell. It was a very interesting talk, lively. I saw some of it on the live stream, so I imagine there was a recording of it somewhere. They have all the slides and notes from it online, since a lot of it was, here's this cool bit of shell script that does stuff. You don't want to be trying to transpose that from the video or your memory or so on. So the slides there's actually some actual, try.sh files that you can use. but it talks about a couple of different techniques and gotchas. The three-finger claw technique is basically wrapping your shell functions in like a try, yell, die setup, so that it deals with problems if they happen during your shell script, so that you don't have to kind of do the error checking constantly as you're writing it. And then they talk about the atomic file system operations, which ones are actually atomic and which ones aren't, and some interesting gotchas, and then other generic shell stuff about input validation and variable handling and all that type of stuff. You've seen lots of disasters with shell. Remember when Steam had that bug where it would rf slash if a certain environment variable wasn't set.
Oops. Yes, I do remember that.
So lots of tips on avoided things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, that was a bad one. Anyway, check that out. That does look interesting. That reminds me, we have like a libsh we use where it's a lot of those helper functions we've predefined, like exit on error, you know, all these different things. But anyway, good stuff. Okay, so we do need to let you know, it looks like of a possible regression that's been found on Dragonfly, the i19 driver graphics on older Core 2 Duos. So we have a link to the mailing list discussing that.
Yes, so basically as part of the update of the graphics driver in Dragonfly BSD to the Linux kernel 4.4, to get all the latest and greatest features from the Linux kernel's i905 driver, apparently has caused some problems with the Core 2 older Intel graphics cards, like the very first generations of Intel's graphics. And so while they work on those, if you're using Core 2 graphics, you might consider switching back to VESA.
Okay. Good to know. And we also have a link. I know FOSDEM was a couple weeks back, but we have videos showing up here. So we have a link to that. It's over at video.fosdem.org/2016. Yep. And so pretty easy to remember.
They're basically broken down by the room where the talk was. So if you click on a room, you can see a list of videos. The BSD dev room was in K4601 on the Sunday. That directory is still empty at the moment, but maybe videos will show up there.
Start appearing soon.
But
keep your eyes on that space.
If you were like me, you were in the BSD dev room all day, and so what you're interested in are the videos of the talks you didn't get to see because you were somewhere else. So hopefully we'll see lots of videos from both, and there's some good stuff in here, so it's worth checking out.
Great. Okay. Well, let's go right into feedback and questions. So first up this week, we got Andrew writes in about smart tests. He says, "Hi, Alan and Chris. A while ago, I wrote to you guys asking about making a switch from FreeNAS to FreeBSD in order to improve my command line foo. I finally found some free time to do this, so I got started last week. In that time, I've learned a lot about FreeBSD and had a great time doing it. One thing I can't figure out is how to implement is to do scheduled smart tests, ZFS scrubs, and have the system send me an email if it gets an error. Could you guys point me in the direction on where to get started with this or any utilities to help? And P.S. Really looking forward to your management utility, Chris. An app will certainly make life easier than trying to use SSH on a smartphone." Oh, man. I've done that just enough times to know I never want to do that.
I remember when I got my first smart-ish phone. It was like a Windows phone that was like a HTC Touch or something.
Sure.
So the screen wasn't very big, so you had to use a stylus for the keyboard because your finger would hit like 6 buttons at once. And so, but because it ran with like Windows CE or whatever, there was a version of PuTTY for it. And using that is like, the big thing is because it was the very beginning of smartphones, they didn't charge you for data. You paid like $10 a month for unlimited mobile internet. Because the web browser that was built into
it was so slow you didn't get much of it.
And the web browser that was built in didn't support style sheets or anything, so you couldn't really use websites much. But it worked very well for unlimited SSH. So I didn't use it very often, but there was a long time like we had just been to the data center, rearranged some stuff, rebooted a machine, and one of the sysctls hadn't got set. So all the VMs weren't bridged to the network. And so the VMs couldn't talk to the network. And so I get the support call as we're like halfway back from the data center, which is like 90 minutes from my house. And I'm like, oh, if we have to turn around to fix this, it's ridiculous. And I was like, whip up my phone. And S is typing in my super long password because I hadn't set up my key for my phone yet. And then set this really long sysctl that has to be spelled exactly correctly. And set it. And then, it works now. Yay.
It's one of those things where you're like, if I was sitting down at a laptop or PC, I could have done this
4
in
seconds.
8 seconds,
Yeah,
right? 4 seconds. But now it's 10 minutes and I'm still typing.
And it's laggy, and it's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill somebody. Anyway.
That's why we're working on a new app.
So running the background smart tests, it depends which ones you're talking about. If you're actually talking about running the smart test where it actually tests the drive, that will severely impact performance and is probably unnecessary outside of a specific need for it. But ZFS Scrub, there's the periodic script in FreeBSD can do that for ZFS. You just have to set it, and it will be included in the, I think it goes part of the monthly periodic. So you will get the email automatically as part of the regular emails that get sent to root. So you need to make sure your aliases file directs the root email address to somewhere useful. And then you'll get your daily periodic report and the daily security report, and then monthly you will get your scrub report.
Nice.
For Smart, you can set up, if you install SmartMon tools, you get a Smart CT or Smart D that runs, and it will can be configured to email you if the smart data on a drive ever suggests that the drive is failing. So if the error counts go up really quickly, or if any of the values get out of the allowed range, then it will trigger emailing you, which is probably more likely what you're looking for anyway.
Okay. Good deal. Hopefully that answers your question, and let us know if you have any problems with that.
So now we have a big, long email from our producer, actually, JT.
Yep. Which was a good question.
Yes.
I'm surprised nobody's asked this. But
I'm glad. I read the email before, and I was like, yeah, we need a solution for that. And then thinking of it now, I was like, oh, I need to add this to the list of things to talk about at the Storage Summit. Yes. So anyway, JT writes in and says, hey, Alan, since you're the go-to ZFS person, I have a question for you, and I've never bothered to ask before. He says, how exactly does secure file deletion work under ZFS? Under older file systems, it was easy to do forensically sound deletion of files. However, I'm unsure how exactly this would be able to take place on ZFS. With the introduction of copy on write and snapshots, how exactly would someone be able to completely delete a file from a drive? I've searched for it, and it seems there's only one article from around 2009 or 2010 suggesting that the only way to avoid the whole issue was put the file system that's going to have the files that need to be securely erased on a ZVol and have Geli encryption or something between that file system and the ZVol, and just delete the key when you want to destroy the file. And then, all the data is not decryptable and problem solved. Of course, that doesn't really give the option to securely delete a file since you would basically have to destroy the entire file system. So if you have a small number of sensitive files, you could do that. But if you have them kind of mixed in with your other files, that could be problematic. He says, some people in the forensic field feel that encryption is good enough to prevent access to data. He'd rather actually have it definitely be overwritten.
Be gone.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need a scrub command that does a different type of scrub.
Yes. So he says, while not a large segment of the IT workload, there is a situation where there are legal requirements to be able to completely and totally purge selected data from a system. And having to create a new pool or buy new drives and copy all the data over, except for the data that you want to be destroyed, is a very ugly way to have to do it. And he says a few of his clients, when he was doing security consulting, had to deal with this like lawyers, when they need to destroy certain information. And while I'm trying to get out of that field, I realized that it's, still something he could do full time. And if he was trying to promote BSD and ZFS as a solution for this, there wouldn't really be a good answer for that. How would you selectively purge specific emails from a mail server is a good example. Especially if attorneys or paralegals have to make a whole new email account every time they want to get rid of a couple of emails, that would be problematic.
It's a little excessive.
So does a utility exist that can intensively purge data from within a ZFS file system? And if not, he humbly requests that zpurge or something similar be created. So I know on FreeBSD there's, I think it's SRM, Secure RM, which on UFS would basically overwrite the file a bunch of times with different patterns. Obviously, that won't do anything on ZFS. So then it becomes a question of how exactly do you solve this problem? One way that I see as a possibility would be a property on the data set, secure equals yes or something, or secure. But you wouldn't want to call it secure erase because that means something specific with like SSDs and so on.
Sure.
But I don't know, secure RM equals yes. And then when ZFS actually frees a block, maybe it could overwrite it with all zeros or something.
Yeah, or garbage a couple times and then zero it.
And so have ZFS, as it frees blocks, actually purge them if they were part of a data set that had that flag. Although I don't know how the groupings of those actually work to, So it will be an interesting discussion we will have at the Storage Summit in 2 weeks.
We expect a follow-up report on that, Alan.
Hopefully.
Hear on how doable that is. And I'm surprised that we haven't been asked this before. That just seems like something like somebody else would have thought of.
Yeah. Well, outside of certain, channels like a lawyer that needs to, as part of a legal settlement, they've agreed that they have to destroy this data they have. I don't think it happens all that often. But still, it'd be a good feature to grow.
Yes, exactly. Okay, well, next up we have Jordan who writes in, asks about migrating to a larger disk. So he says, hi, Alan and Chris. I've been a hobbyist FreeBSD home user for a few years using pfSense as a firewall, and I have a FreeBSD server running OwnCloud and tiny RSS in jails. The firewall and server are each running on a P-Engine's APU1 board, the perfect little machine for playing around with BSD. Recently, I found the perfect use for a similar setup at work, simulating the backend system distributing data to a company's iPad app using both jails and Beehive VMs. I initially used an old 30 gigabyte drive I had laying around to keep the costs low, but now I have to upgrade it to a larger disk. I've been looking all over for documentation on how to migrate a ZFS root disk to a new larger disk, but I haven't found anything that inspires a lot of confidence in the right way to perform the task. What's the best way to migrate a single ZFS root disk to a new drive? Keep up the good work, and I enjoy listening every week, even if the subject matter is way over my head at times. I know how I do it. Alan, how about you?
There are two different ways, depending what you want to do. You can basically take a snapshot and ZFS send it to a new pool that you've created on a bigger disk, or you could use zpool attach to add the new disk as a mirror. Basically, upgrade your single disk ZFS pool to a mirror. And then you'll have these two disks, and then use the detach command to get rid of the small disk once it's all been resilvered to the big disk. The disadvantage to doing the mirror type thing is when ZFS creates the pool, it divides the disk up into 200 chunks, and the 30 gig disk, those chunks will be very small, so it'll end up with a whole lot of metaslabs on it if you upgrade to, say, a 4 terabyte disk. So especially with that big of a change, I would probably suggest the ZFS send route.
Yeah, I've done it both ways, but the send receive was definitely better so I could change the block size when I did the reinstall, because that was right around the time I was going from 512 to 4K, so it just made sense to not do a mirror.
Yep.
But I have done the mirror, and even on USB. Like, I had a system where it only had it was a teeny box, there was only room for one hard drive in it, so I just had an external exclosure. USB, plugged it in, mirrored it. It took forever, but when it was finished, just swapped the drives, and it worked fine. So since it's going to be your boot and root drive, though, make sure you stamp boot sectors on it.
You have to create the FreeBSD-boot partition and put GPD ZFS boot and all that stuff.
Take a look at the gpart command. Just look at how your old drive's set up and make sure you at least set up the boot system similarly.
Yeah. One way you can do it, if both disks are attached to the same system, you can use, if you do gpart backup, and then, ADA 0, pipe gpart restore, ADA 1, it will clone the partition table. Then just resize the ZFS partition to be bigger on the resulting disk. That's how I make sure my disks are laid out the same when I'm replacing a failed disk. If I have like an 8 or 12 disk array and one of them fails, I just clone one of the existing drives onto the new drive.
Because you probably don't remember how it was set.
Well, I want all the numbers to be exact, so...
Yep.
And it solves that problem.
Nice. Okay. Well, good luck with that, and let us know if you have any problems. Okay, so next up we have Lars. He says, hello, guys. I'm a listener since day one and also listen to TechSnap. I'm in the process of designing and setting up my new home infrastructure. My initial idea was to use KVM as a hypervisor, Promox VE running my virtual machines, and use a FreeNAS Mini as storage for the VMs, either using iSCSI or NFS. Not decided yet. Going to have to test. My initial idea is to use 2 hypervisor boxes and the FreeNAS Mini. Most of my VMs are and will be FreeBSD, but I will have 2 or so Linux VMs, at least Security Onion and Kali Linux. But Beehive is getting more mature now. It can run Linux VMs. From what I read about Beehive, it looks like that the strongest combo is using it with ZFS local on the hypervisor box. Then you would need separate disks for your OS and your zpool storing the VMs. Let's see. With this, I would not need a FreeNAS Mini, although Beehive will be integrated in FreeNAS 10, question mark. Yeah, that is the current plan. But with a FreeNAS Mini, I could snapshot replicate the VM from my Beehive hypervisor box zpool to the Mini. So my question is, what are your opinions on the pros and cons of having the VM storage on a central storage platform versus having the VM storage local on the hypervisor box? Especially looking at the event that the hypervisor box dies, what do you need to get your setup to get your VMs back easily and quickly using Beehive?
Right. The general design where you have 2 hypervisors in the one central storage box that's what you have to have set up in order to do live migration to move a VM from one machine to the other machine without actually shutting it down. So there's that. The main advantage to having the storage local is you're no longer bottlenecked by your network. Right? If you have, I say even a gigabit network, that means the most disk bandwidth you can get is 120 megabytes a second. Whereas if you're off a couple of disks locally in your pool, each of those disks can probably do 150 or more megabytes a second. And so now all of a sudden you're comparing, well, over my network, I have 120 megabytes a second, or off a local disk, I can do 600 megabytes a second if I have a couple of disks set up together. So, that's a consideration. As far as if the machine dies, like something wrong with the machine and the disks are fine, if it's a zpool, you can just import it on another machine and it's good to go. And you just start things back up. You don't have to have a separate disks or anything to do the VMs. If you put Beehive on FreeBSD, you can just use data sets and files or zvols to run your VMs, and you don't have to have separate disks for your OS and your pool. But you can.
Okay.
Whatever you want to do. And obviously when it's FreeBSD on FreeBSD, Beehive works really well. But also obviously jails are an option if you have just some of your VMs that maybe don't need quite as much separation or whatever. But Linux works very well in Beehive for me. I've got some Linux boxes with over a year of uptime running in Beehive. And they're not idle either. Okay. They're hugely CPU loaded.
That is pretty
And
slick.
lots of networking too.
Okay, well, hope that answered your question there. So next up, we have Alex, who's asking about IPsec. He said, I'm looking at setting up a VPN on DigitalOcean Droplet and can find tutorials for OpenVPN and StrongSwan under Linux. But I've not had much luck finding a good guide on setting this up under FreeBSD. I want to go IPsec for native client compatibility under Windows 7, 8, 9, or 7, 8, and 10, iOS, and Android. Thank you for the excellent show. Keep up the good work. Also looking forward to another episode of Brian Cantrell Rants. Well, we'll have to do that here soon.
So, yes, IPsec is definitely something people have done. I don't know of a tutorial off the top of my head.
There's a section in the handbook that talks about the setup of it.
And I think one of the things is called Raccoon, and something makes me think there's StrongSwan for FreeBSD, but I don't actually know. I've not played with IPsec very much. But if you know of a good tutorial or how to set it up, make sure you email us and we'll put it in the show. Yeah,
it definitely lists installing IPsec tools from ports and whatnot. Definitely the handbook. That's at least a good starting place.
I know in FreeBSD 11, IPsec is also on by default, where it didn't used to be.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad some of these things are starting to get turned on by default.
It needs to be on by default or easily loadable as a module. Otherwise, it's not very useful.
That's right. Okay. I hope we answered your question. Wish you luck with that, Alex. So as we close the show, of course, guys, we want to make sure to mention to you guys, send any comments or show ideas. If you have topics, something you find out on the net that looks interesting, you want us to put in a future episode, send that over to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll do our best to make sure it lands in one of the upcoming episodes. Of course, if you want to be interviewed for something, We need, of course, all those who are available who haven't been interviewed yet. I mean, heck, we might have to do some repeats at this point because we've done 128 episodes now. I mean, minus maybe one where we didn't do an interview.
I think there was one where we did a roundup tutorial thing,
Yeah. So we've definitely done a lot. But if you're still working out there on BSD and doing something cool and neat and interesting, we definitely need to get you back on the show and make that a recurring thing. So get in touch with us as well. Send that over to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'd love to get you scheduled for an interview for an upcoming week. And of course, we'll be back same time next week. And I guess you'll have the Storage Summit shortly after that, Alan. So we'll look forward to hearing how that goes. And I'll be curious about that security lead if anyone... Especially Matt Aarons would be there. I'd have to imagine somebody's asked him about this before.
I would expect.
I would expect so, but anyway, we'll be curious to hear what the answer is to that. So thanks for being here this week. Same time next week. Be back, and look forward to speaking to you then.